First of all, thanks for having me, Matt. It's a real pleasure. And thanks to all of you for coming to the conference, but also listening to our story. So Flynn Group consists of 8 brands. I'll list them chronologically in the order we got into them. Applebee's, which we did for exclusively for well over a decade. But since then, Taco Bell, Panera, Arby's, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, Planet Fitness, and most recently, 7 Brew. So it rolls up to about 3,000 restaurants in 44 states and 3 countries, the other 2 countries being Australia and New Zealand, where we're the master franchisee for both Pizza Hut and Wendy's. It's about $5 billion in sales, and we directly employ 78,000 people. We're the largest franchise operator in the world, but probably more interestingly, we're the 3rd largest operator of restaurants in the United States after only Starbucks and Chipotle. So we run a lot of restaurants.
That is a fascinating statistic that even I did not appreciate about your scale. But let's go back to the beginning, just to sort of bring people, through your journey to where you got today, because so many at this conference, the nearly 800 franchisees, I think about themselves as, and their business as, how are we going to think about scaling over time? So you started with 8 Applebee's in Seattle in 1999, but you were in the restaurant industry before that, not in franchising. So let's go back to the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, so I came out of business school in 1994 and actually started a real estate business. But then a friend of mine opened a restaurant called World Wraps that started the whole wraps thing. Like, I didn't start it, but he did start it. And there were no wraps really before then. And there were lines around the block. And we were 100% convinced we had the next Starbucks on our hand. So he and I shook hands, and I became sort of a franchisee, really. But there was one unit, right? So I became sort of a joint venture partner in the Seattle market. So he was running San Francisco, I was running Seattle. And I built 14 of them between 1995 and 99. It was basically a raw startup. And during that time, I learned everything about, restaurants, about how to find a location and design it, and build it, and staff it, and then run it, and try to market it. And it was really the school of hard knocks. Like, so hard I can't even tell you. But we were kind of making it. But then in the very late 90s, there, for a minute, emerged a form of finance that would loan you 100% of the cost of building or buying a top-tier franchise restaurant. Not the kind I was building, but think of Applebee's, Taco Bell, KFC, non-recourse. So they were basically giving out equity options. And I looked at this, it's like, why are they doing it? And the reason is they reached the conclusion that there was a relatively low level of risk, a high level of consistent performance in the top-tier franchise brands. So I pivoted and I said, why am I killing myself building these World Wraps? I should go become a franchisee of a major brand. And I did. So I borrowed literally all the money. I bought 8 Applebee's restaurants in Washington in '99, and that was really the beginning of Flynn Group. What I didn't know was that it was the right decision for all the other reasons. Like, not just because I could borrow all the money, but because being a franchisee of a well-run, top-tier brand gives you many advantages and makes it a much better risk-adjusted bet than being an independent startup restaurant operator, or frankly, even part of something very small and new. They have high brand awareness, high brand love, huge marketing budgets. Most of the systems are worked out. Everything is easier. Landlords know you and want you. Vendors know you and want to sell to you. Customers know you and come when you open the doors without having to educate them on what it is. Like, everything about it is easier. And at the end of the day, the royalty you pay for that, call it 4 or 5%, is worth it. Like, you get more for it than it costs you. Or at least that's the conclusion I reached. So that's why I pivoted.
So you are a super fan of franchising, obviously, as we were listening this morning to our opening keynote speaker, but premium brands. And you've pivoted a little bit in the last couple years in a couple of different ways. And so you talked about the portfolio you have, obviously moving into Planet Fitness, and then pivoting internationally, but now most recently starting this Flynn growth business unit, I guess, for lack of a better term, within the Flynn Group. So I'd love to hear why pivoting away from restaurants. A lot of people here, I think, are thinking about diversification, not just within the restaurant industry, but also non-food retail and others, home services, whatever it may be. Talk about that pivot, and then I'd love to get into a little bit of Flynn growth, idea and the partnership with Seven Brew.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we focused on only Applebee's for the first chapter of our life, call it from 99 to 2012. And that served us very well. Why Applebee's? Because, it was at the time the hottest brand in the hottest sector. So casual dining was like the fast casual of today. And it was, call it the kava, of the 90s. And we could get into it and did get into it, and that was an excellent decision. That's the era that laid the foundation for everything, which is the core team, and we're still all together. But it's also the systems, the culture, the unique structure that we utilize, the access to capital, the relationship with our franchisors. It all dates back to that era. When we decided to diversify and to do more with the platform, we said, okay, we could just pick a brand and hope it's a good one. But we said, no, the industry is already telling you what it wants from restaurants. And what it wants is, first of all, quick service. You saw the slides up there, 60, 70% of all restaurants are limited service restaurants. Two, it wants the biggest, most successful brands. People are voting with their feet. And they may want something new tomorrow, but what they want right now are the brands that frankly are already out there. And those brands are, for the most part, executing better because of the scale advantages they enjoy, and I've talked about some of them. So we put a filter on it, premier brands only, and that means they've been around for decades. They've proved their wherewithal over multiple economic cycles, across every geography. They have huge marketing budgets. So, and QSR skewed. So that's where the Taco Bell and the Panera and the Arby's and the Wendy's and the Pizza Hut come in. So then I think your question was, what about outside the restaurant industry? And then why did we pivot away from premier big brands only?
Yes.
So by the time we got through COVID, we'd grown a lot. By 22, 23, we said, okay, what's next? What's our third chapter of growth going to be? And it's going to be growing in this big center lane, of domestic franchise restaurants. But A, it's a big world out there, and there are a lot of groups like us, not quite as big, but like other groups, operating in other countries, usually in multiple brands in multiple countries, making good money. And I thought we could do that, hence the expansion to Australia and New Zealand. And so far, that's been really exciting. But it's a wide world of franchising. I mean, people have been talking a lot about restaurants up here, but Matt, you run the IFA. Restaurants may not even be a majority of your members
They're
anymore.
not. 40% of our membership is restaurants. So the largest category, 25 or so QSR limited, and 15 of that is full service, more experiential. But 60% of the franchising universe, at least by brand count, is non-food.
Yeah, so when I first thought about what am I going to do with myself, when I thought of franchise, I thought of restaurants. I have since come to appreciate that it is a very big universe of very viable franchise brands out there. And it's a bit solipsistic to say it is just restaurants. Yeah. And so we said, okay, we can take this platform and the team and the access to capital and do more with it outside of restaurants. And then we did a very formal study of everything out there, and we landed on Planet Fitness as our first step outside. We now have 43 Planet Fitness clubs. We're growing very fast in that brand right now. It's a great business, but it's just an example of great businesses that are multi-unit franchise businesses that aren't restaurants. And so I encourage everyone to keep their mind open. It's not just restaurants out there.
Well, and you were sharing with me last night a little bit about the scale within your network just of Planet vis-a-vis some of the others. I'd love if you'd share a little bit more insight in that. And then as you think about this next pivot on Flynn growth, how you made that decision, and what are the KPIs or criteria that you and your team look at when you're evaluating brands like the several hundred that are here that would love to have somebody like a Flynn Group be a partner.
Yeah. Okay. So I've already talked about the sort of premier brand. So put that aside. But we did apply that when we looked outside the restaurant industry. So for us, it needed to be a big and growing category, and fitness meets those criteria. It needed to be a large brand that had proved its viability across wide geographies, broad demographics, and Planet Fitness checks the box by a mile there. By the way, there are 2,800 Planet Fitnesses. I think the next biggest is Crunch at 500. I mean, there's just a mile gap between number one and number two in that category. And if we were going to play, we were going to play in the number one, right? But then you look at the business itself, and I've just come to appreciate what a great business subscription fitness is. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One is general gyms like we do, and I like very general things with very broad appeal because you never know where the world is going. But if you're broad enough, you can sort of adapt and stay relevant. The narrower you get, like if you're super boutique fitness and you're like a super hot Pilates thing at the moment, like that may be great and your unit economics are great for a minute, but like I don't know what they're gonna be 5 years from now once the world has moved on.
Yeah.
Whereas a full service, inexpensive gym, I can get conviction that it's got wherewithal, right? So that was our play. And like all of our restaurant brands, if we do it, we want to do it meaningfully so that we enjoy scale economies and we have a seat at the table with our systems and our franchisors to have a really collaborative relationship. So that's what we're doing in Planet Fitness. When I look at the universe of other franchise businesses and industries out there are not that many that are that big.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it drops off pretty fast.
What's interesting? Hospitality. So we have over 100 hotels. We're the actually 17th largest Marriott franchisee too. So hospitality is a very large industry, but it's super capital intensive, like to buy hotels and things like that. So I think the sweetest is find things that are big and growing systems, or big enough and growing systems that they've shown that they're viable, but they're not so capital intensive that you're going to be unable to sort of put the capital together to grow meaningfully. But capital intensive enough to keep people out. Things that are too capital light, there's just no defensive barriers.
Yeah. So let's, obviously we talked about development and some of your strategy with brand selection, but let's talk about, within the business, right? And, you're an incredibly accessible guy, but you have a large team that you rely upon. I think a lot of multi-unit operators are thinking about, how do I scale my franchisee organization as I think about diversification and growth? I'd love for you to just share, some of the evolution kind of inside the four walls of the Flynn Group as you've scaled to become the largest franchisee, and how you think about, how do you spend your time? How do the different direct reports you have spend their time? I always feel like that's a fascinating, yet very tactical thing that multi-unit groups are thinking about.
Sure. So I think the challenge is as you grow big and you achieve scale economies, and scale economies are very valuable. It's not just in the obvious things like administration and HR, IT, purchasing, real estate, but there are other advantages of scale, which include many employees, many people just want to work with larger, more stable organizations. It gives them a little level of security, but it also gives them opportunity because there's more movement within it. And if they really want to grow, like we just have more openings for people to grow into and things like that. So there are real reasons to grow, but you need to keep, or we've really struggled to keep thinking small. And we've structured around it. Like the nature of Flynn Group is like a fleet of ships, think of it, or we often describe it as a state and federal model. So we support all of our restaurants with central support that is high quality and at low cost per unit, but that's the second most important thing we do. The main thing we do is we push authority down at the operating level to the market level. And we try to recreate the experience for our key operators, we call them market presidents, of if they had been a franchisee on their own in a single brand, in a single geographic area, in a market, right? So that's a span of like 20 to 50 restaurants. And they're close enough so that that operator, our market president, can get to them frequently. And so that they can know their people, and they can know their assets, and they can know their competitors, and their customers, their vendors. They just have better information available to them to make decisions about their business. And we trust them to make the right decisions. Now, it's not without any guardrails. They can't build a restaurant without talking to us or whatever. But like, you know, we know that by trusting them, they will understand and execute on decisions better than if they're just forced on them, right? B, they'll own the outcomes because they were their decisions to begin with. And C, the right people will like their jobs better and will attract better people, and they'll stay with us and deliver better performance. Because the best people enjoy autonomy. The best people are fine with accountability. Like, they like the challenge of, let me go take that hill.
Yeah.
And then we align our interests through profit sharing in the current sense, but then equity. Like, equity in Flynn Group, in the top company. So I am side-by-side partners with every one of our brand presidents. And
that's, you said 40-ish people?
No, it's more like 80-ish people.
80, okay.
Yeah. But, I never tell anyone what to do.
Yeah.
My job is to help them themselves figure out what is the best thing for them to do and give them the latitude to go do it. And if it works, figure out what they did and how we disseminate it throughout Flynn Group.
Fascinating. We heard a little bit on the last session on AI and technology. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about how, you're thinking about technology, AI, where this world is going within franchising broadly, or within the Flynn Group and at the restaurant level.
So it's interesting. Mike Culp described a AI system he's using, at least it sounded like in some test restaurants, where I guess cameras and microphones, like monitor everything that everyone does and says, and I don't know, feels a little Big Brother-ish to me, but we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be smart about how we employ technology, but the core challenge and opportunity in our business is on the people front. Like, I still think that's the hardest thing to do well each and every day, everywhere, for the rest of our lives. Like, a lot of people might do it well for a while, but to keep doing it well everywhere, that's super hard. Technology can help with that, but essentially, it's a relationship.
It's a people business. It's a relationship business.
And then I think, what do our customers really want in the long run? There was a moment, leaving 5-10 years ago, where people thought, okay, full service dining is dead. Who was Travis Kalanick's brother? Or no, Elon Musk's brother, or something like that. He said,
it was the Uber guy. Travis, yeah.
It wasn't Travis. It was Elon Musk's brother, I think. But he said, you know what? No one wants to go to a restaurant anymore. Like,
you want a drone to deliver, your slot bowl to your house and eat it in your basement.
It sort of reminds me of the old joke, the bumper sticker, it said, God is dead, Nietzsche. And then Nietzsche is dead, God. Like, well, where is Elon Musk's brother in the restaurant industry now? I've never met the guy, no offense, but he was just wrong. Like, people are not just buying food. This is not food as fuel, and I want to get it as efficiently as possible in all cases. They're largely buying experiences. And, it's interesting to see Brian Niccol at Starbucks now. So he's the CEO of Starbucks, came from Taco Bell, I know him from then. And what he's done with Starbucks is say, wait a minute, we are leaning so hard into technology, so much of our business is becoming a transaction without interaction, and it's hurting us. It's not helping us. We're not giving people really what they crave and can't get other places. What built Starbucks, and made it special was being a third place. You had homework, and this was like a place you could go, and you felt like yours, and it was an experience.
Yeah.
And he's leaning hard back into that now. Right? We just got into 7 Brew. You asked about Flynn growth. So having been only in big premier brands, for 30 years, we finally made the decision last year to get into a younger brand. 7 Brew is young by our standards. It has 500 plus units and it's growing very quickly, but still it's much younger than anything we've gotten into. You know what? 7 Brew is an amazing brand, but they're about to launch this, but like they, until recently, didn't have an app where you could order ahead. Like, you pulled up and they don't have a menu. Like, there's a person with an iPad that talks you through your order. And they do an amazing job. There are lines around the block,
It's kind of nostalgic in a way.
It is.
Like,
and what they figured out is they're not selling coffee drinks only. they're selling interactions that people like.
Crave. We
And
crave. I mean, look at this room.
And they hire people who also want to interact with people.
Yeah.
And you're getting your coffee, but you're also getting a little chat. And enough people want that along the way. And so I think that technology will help in a lot of ways, but like there's still going to be an important role that humans play in this.
Well,
whole
and then
equation.
paired with incredible marketing,
Yeah.
right, which is driving the whole business, I think, at a way and scale without as much paid media as you need. So, like, you're in a lot of brands. Like, who else is doing, really innovative things on the marketing side right now that you'd like? We've talked about this many times, more privately, but like, I mean, you shared a really interesting Wendy's story with me.
Yeah.
Recently at an IFA event about a month ago. What are some things that stand out to you, or some of the challenging conversations that you've also had to have in a collaborative way with some of the brands you've been involved with, where like, we got to fix this because, as we heard from David a minute ago, like, traffic is down and we got to bring people in.
Well, I mean, there's a lot in that question.
Go wherever you want. We got 7 minutes. So.
So I think advertising is fascinating. I really like it. But there's such a sea of sameness out there and so little cuts through that, we are in the shoes of the franchisor in Australia and New Zealand. So, we do the advertising in Australia for Pizza Hut. And we just came out with a new ad, and it's for hot honey pizza. And it's just the funniest ad. So it's at a funeral. It's like a reception after a funeral. And a man is there. He's like, 40-year-old, good-looking guy. And he's bereaved, and he's sitting on the couch. And a woman comes up to him, and she says, "I'm very sorry for your loss." She's very sweet, right? And then she picks up a piece of our pizza, this hot honey pizza, and she takes a bite. And suddenly, it's hot, right? Because it's the hot honey. And she looks at me and is like, "What are you doing afterwards?" And anyway, it's like, I love breakthrough advertising that uses humor. And that's our approach. Now, social media lets you do that, at lower cost with broader reach and longer format. And, so the best advertising these days is coming out in video format in social media primarily. But I think what you were asking about in part was our Wendy's positioning down there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one.
So this is fun. In there were no Wendy's units in Australia. So we had a blank slate to ride on. And we had a couple of years to think about it and say, okay, what do? You take a legacy brand like Wendy's that has a lot of brand love and real unique characteristics like, Wendy herself and square burgers, fresh, never frozen, Frosties. There's a lot of great things about Wendy's. But, you can modernize it. When I look at the universe of concepts out there, what succeeds the best these days? It's those who do a smaller number of things really well at high velocity, right? So it's the Chick-fil-A's, the Raising Cane's, the Shake Shacks, the In-N-Outs, narrow menus, really good products delivered at a high velocity with high level of service. So we decided to try to do both with Wendy's in Australia. So we have a burger line. You get single, double, triple with or without bacon. We have a hand-breaded chicken tenders line that may or may not taste exactly like Raising Cane's. And you can get 2 for on a bun or not, and Frosties. And there are a couple of other, like you can get fries too, but like that's the menu. And our restaurants, if you look at QSR, it's sort of a sea of red out there. Like almost all the restaurants are red. In Australia, they were like literally all red. And so we said, okay, we're not gonna be red. We're gonna be like this electric royal blue. It's very cool. But the main tweak we made is, when you look at QSR, especially in Australia, it's very old white male, right? There's KFC, like Colonel Sanders, literally like the archetype of old white male. There's Burger King in Australia is called Hungry Jack's, and that refers to Jack Cowan, who's a very well-known, crotchety 85-year-old billionaire, white guy. And then there's the McDonald's clown, and I guess he's a white guy. I don't know, who knows, right? But it sure seems like it's dominated by white males. And so we're coming to town with Wendy. But Wendy is not like a 12-year-old girl with freckles and pigtails anymore. Wendy is now in her 20s, and she's in Australia. Like, think of it as an extended spring break or something. And she's having fun, and she's smart, and she's sassy, and she's good looking, and she's taken on the man. And so we leaned heavily into the feminine presence of Wendy and really target our social media toward women and especially girls. And it went completely viral. Like, I'm not even kidding. We almost dominated the news for a couple of weeks when we started opening down there. And we had girls all over Australia running around in like red wigs.
That's great.
And we had lines out the door from our first and our second openings. We've only opened 2 so far. The second one broke the worldwide sales records for Wendy's by 50%, by a mile, right? And I just think we're onto something, that you can take a legacy brand, but sort of reframe it and figure out what is the best about it, but what's the best about competitors' formats, and sort of do a mashup, and it's working, I think.
Well, to steal a term from a great IFA leader, Sam Ballas, like, it's kind of a re-emerging way of talking about the brand through this innovative marketing strategy.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get you out of here on a question about your involvement in the IFA, your involvement in the National Restaurant Association too. You're a great board member, you're a great advocate for franchising. But we do a lot of work in advocacy. Mitch touched on some of the things that are priority for the organization right now. Just, everybody's busy, right? It's like one more thing to do. But you've personally made a commitment, to be more involved in, telling the industry story, talking about issues that impact your bottom line, and also are maybe sometimes perceived as, even like a franchisor's problem. Why should I, as a franchisee, help solve this problem? Just, take a minute or two on the why and the how for those that may have not taken that step in their business.
Sure. And everyone in this room is here because you're interested in franchising. You're either trying to become or are a franchisee, or you're trying to find franchisees. And why are we all doing this? Well, my conclusion, it is obviously one of the greatest engines of entrepreneurial opportunity in the world, right? The cliche is you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. But that's true. And that's what got me into it, and I'm a product of...
Like, you literally wouldn't be standing here doing what you're doing without the model, the franchise model.
Yeah, and it's a divide and conquer model that I believe delivers value and superior performance from both sides. So as a franchisee, my primary role is to run restaurants or whatever, Planet Fitness clubs, well each and every day, everywhere for the rest of my life. Sounds easy, but it's like super hard. I also think it's probably the most important determinant in my success, is like how I run those businesses on the ground every day. So I can focus on that and do that well, and build new units along the way. But what our franchisors do is very important also. It's menu, it's marketing, it's prototype, it's technology. That all matters too. And they can focus on that. And if we're each focused on these very important pieces and collaborating well, it's just a powerful combination. We're both better than we would be if we were each of us trying to do all of that. That's my conclusion. Now, why am I involved in the IFA? Because the franchise model is well understood and appreciated by some people, but it's misunderstood and underappreciated by enough people that there are constant threats to it everywhere. Mostly these are at the state and local level. Sometimes it's at the federal level. But there's always a story of some franchisee that lost money, feels screwed, goes to their local legislator and says there ought to be a law, and suddenly there's a law coming down the pike that threatens the whole model because someone didn't understand it right appropriately. And I think it's our collective responsibility to protect the model. And a lot of that is just education. Some of it is self-policing too. I think the IFA ought to be the sort of regulator for franchising. So get to it, Matt.
Well, we're out of time here. Right. I've got a few other board members here that may have a perspective on how we get there. But I think we do have a collective responsibility to improve franchising from within.
Yeah.
I think putting yourself in a room like this is part of that responsibility. We appreciate you being a leader, not just within our organization, but within franchising, building relationships with lawmakers, writing checks to support various causes that we have at the IFA. So thank you I know you've got a busy week and a trip you got to make back east. So thank you, Greg Flynn. Let's give Greg a round of applause for being here with us.
Thank you.